God has called you by name. God has called you. Those are words I use actually whenever I confirm somebody. God has called you by name and made you his own. They're really important words for any of us who's a Christian disciple, to know that we are called by God, that we belong to God, that we are part of God's life, that there is that intimacy, that specialness of relationship between us and God. But those words which I use on those occasions are actually derived from verses in Isaiah, which are not addressed to individuals, but to the whole people of God. God calls his people in righteousness. God calls his people to be a light to the nations. God calls his people to be a source of justice in the world. God's calling comes to us as the people of God. And within our diocese, over recent months, we've been seeking to discern God's calling for us across our diocese, across our communities, our parishes, our chaplaincies, and in many other settings. What is God calling us to in these coming days? What is God calling us to be? How are we to be in the world? And we'll be seeking in different ways to share the strands of this calling as we've heard it expressed by people across our diocese, and as we've sought to gather that together and to give a common voice to it. God calls us to be his people, and to be God's people is a tremendous calling, to live for God, to know that we belong to God, and together as God's people to respond to the opportunities that are before us. We know that the church and the world indeed face many challenges. There are all sorts of issues around us, about our culture, about our society, internal things within the church, about numbers, about money, about buildings, all these things. But actually, what we've heard when we've listened to people across the diocese is a desire for us to be confident in our faith, to be ready to proclaim that faith and to live it out in our communities. That's what we believe God is calling us to together. To grow the church, to grow as disciples, to enrich our communities, and to steward the resources that God has given us in such ways as to serve that mission to which we are called. God calls us by name and makes us his own. God calls us together into a common endeavour of worship and of prayer, of proclamation and of service. God calls us to join with him in transforming the lives of individuals and communities. God calls us above all to show forth his character in acts and attitudes of grace and generosity. In each place where we are, in village, town, suburban or urban setting, in workplace, school, college, hospital or other place of human activity, in all of these and other settings across South East London, Medway and Kent, we are called together to enhance and steward our resources for the work of God, to enrich with Christian value and character the places where we are, to grow in numbers and in spiritual vigour disciples who will be both faithful and fruitful. But as we say to those who are to be ordained, and it applies equally to all of us, you cannot bear the weight of this calling in your own strength, but only by the grace and power of God. Pray therefore that your hearts may daily be enlarged and your understanding of the Scriptures enlightened. Pray earnestly for the gift of the Holy Spirit.